To reinforce all of the theory that we're going to be going through in this course, I really want you to get some hands-on practice. And that will not only better prepare you for the real world, you're likely to face some configuration or verification questions on the Encore exam where you'll have to maybe sit at a console and interact with Cisco IOS. So how do we get that lab experience? Well, I've got a couple of options for you. Number one, you may want to buy a home lab. You can get online and purchase some used gear and construct your own home lab. A lot of people prefer to do that because it gets them experience with the actual equipment, physically plugging cables in, maybe putting the equipment in racks. There's a lot of benefit to that. And if I were building a home lab for Encore studies, I might go out and try to get maybe 3 2911 Cisco routers. And I might buy 3 of the Cisco 3650 Catalyst switches. That's going to give me a lot of features and a lot of possible topologies that I can build. It's not going to let me do everything that you might want to do throughout this course. It's not going to, for example, support a feature called ERSpan. Those devices were not built with programmability in mind, so they're not going to support netconf or restconf. But you can do many hands-on labs with some fairly inexpensive home lab gear. Another option, and I think it's the most flexible option, and it's what I recommend to most students, is to use a network emulator. Now, that's not a simulator. Something like a Cisco Packet Tracer is a simulator. It's simulating Cisco IOS. It kind of sort of feels like you're in Cisco IOS, but you're not really. And while that might be great for CCNA studies, at this level, I think Cisco Packet Tracer is probably not the best choice. I know it would probably frustrate me when I try to do certain things. So instead, I recommend an emulator, which is actually running Cisco IOS. And there are different emulators out there. There is GNS3, there's EVE-NG, but you have to have Cisco images to use with those emulators. What I prefer to do is yearly, I pay a subscription to CML Personal Version. That's Cisco Modeling Labs. There is a free version, and I've given you a link on screen to go check out the free version as well as the paid personal version. The big difference is the number and types of nodes that are supported. With the free version, you have 5 nodes, and those nodes can be a Cisco IOS router, a Cisco Catalyst switch, it might be a computer running Linux. Those would all take up node licenses, and you can have as many unmanaged switches as you would like in that topology. However, you're not going to have as wide of a range of nodes available in the free version as you do in the personal version. Just like with your home lab, you're probably not going to be able to do an ERSpan lab. You're not going to be able to work with netconf or restconf. But it is free, and it will let you do most of the labs throughout this course. But for the most flexibility, I like to use the personal version of CML. At the time of this recording, the cost is $199 US yearly to maintain that subscription, and that's going to give you 20 different nodes that you can use. And some of those are fairly high-end nodes. In one of the demonstrations I'm going to be doing for you coming up in this course, we're going to be using a Cisco Catalyst 8000 series switch. And we're going to be running ERSpan on that. Well, that's not an option if you're on the free version, but it is if you have the personal version. But however you decide to construct your home lab, let's talk about how you can download and use the lab guides that you'll find in this Encore course. As you're navigating through the course, if you look over in the left-hand pane, you see basically the outline of the course. And as you go through lesson by lesson by lesson, you will periodically come upon a lab lesson. For example, here I'm highlighting the OSPF route summarization lab. And in that lab lesson, up at the top of the screen, there is a downloads area. And if you click that, you'll be able to download a PDF of this OSPF route summarization lab. And these labs are sprinkled throughout the course. So after we talk about certain topics, I might follow that up with a lab exercise for you. If you want to go to just one place and download all of the labs so you have them all together, you could go down to the very bottom on the left-hand side. Under the course download section, there you'll see an area for labs download. And if you go into that, and under the downloads area at the top of the screen, you can download a zip file that contains all of the lab documents from the course. And now that we have a lab guide downloaded, let's see the components of that lab guide. You're typically going to be given a topology, and you can use this topology to recreate the topology on whatever gear or emulator that you might be using, keeping in mind that the interface identifiers might be different. If you're using the free version of CML, you're going to have 10 meg Ethernet interfaces. You're not going to have gig Ethernet interfaces, so you might need to change the base configuration a bit. You'll also have a base configuration, and that's going to be followed by the lab tasks that you're going to be going through. And I want you to try this on your own first. Try to accomplish all the lab tasks. But if you get stuck, or if you just want to check your work when you're done, we also give you a complete step-by-step walkthrough solution with commentary showing you how to execute each of those lab tasks. And as an example, I've downloaded a BGP lab document, and I've brought up my free version of CML, and I want to walk you through how we can use the lab guide to construct this topology in the free version of CML. For this BGP lab, we only have 2 routers, and we've got a couple of unmanaged switches, so I can very easily create that topology. My interface identifiers might not be the same because I'm using the free version of CML, which doesn't do gig interfaces, yet my topology shows gig interfaces. That's going to be easy to handle though. Let's start off with an unmanaged switch. That'll be down toward the bottom. We'll drag that onto our topology. Let's now get a iOS on Linux router. Put that just below. Let's get another IOL router and another unmanaged switch. I'm quickly going to go through and name these devices to match what my topology is. So I'll double click the unmanaged switch, change its name to SW1. Let's change the name of the first router to R1. And the next router, we'll set its name to R2. And finally, we'll give a name of SW2 to that bottom switch. Now let's interconnect them. And as I do this, the interface identifiers are not going to match up perfectly, because if I try to add a link from this unmanaged switch into the router, I don't really care what the port is on my unmanaged switch, but notice the router does not have any gig interfaces. They're all Ethernet interfaces. Well, my topology says gig 0/1. Well, I'm just going to use Ethernet 0/1, and I will update my base configuration accordingly. I'll say I want to create that link, and I'll create a link between R1 and R2. And instead of going between gig 0/2 and gig 0/1, I'll go between Ethernet 0/2 and Ethernet 0/1. And similarly, going down to SW2, I'll come out of R2 on interface Ethernet 0/2. And I'll create that link. Let's go ahead and start lab. And as the lab is starting, let's modify our base configuration to match our topology. Let's highlight the configuration, noting that there might be some copyright information here in the middle that we need to edit out. But I'll copy that, and I'm going to go paste that in a text editor. And I'll get this copyright information deleted. And one of the things we were dealing with when we were building that topology is we didn't have our interfaces match up perfectly. Our interfaces were Ethernet 0/1 and Ethernet 0/2, not gig. So I'm going to change those gig instances to Ethernet instances. I'll just type in ETH. And something else you might notice with the free version is you don't have VTY lines that go up to 15. It just goes up to 4. And there's going to be one other incompatibility as I paste this in, but I'm going to leave it just so I can show you how to deal with any kind of incompatibility in your iOS versions. I'm going to copy this. Let's go back over to our router. Let's open up a console. And on router R1, let's paste in that base configuration. Well, it mostly worked, but if we look through the configuration, you'll see that there was one error. It said that we had a syntax error between domain and lookup. It did not want that hyphen. Depending on your version of Cisco iOS, sometimes that command is going to be domain space lookup. Sometimes it's going to be domain hyphen lookup. And in this instance, on this free version of CML, it's going to be a domain space lookup. So I'm simply going to go back to my text document. I'll get rid of that hyphen, and I'll do another copy paste. And that time, all the lines went in, no issues at all. Perfect. So I now have router R1 configured. Let's do the same thing for router R2. I'll copy its configuration, and I'll paste it into my text editor, remembering that my VTY lines only go to 4, not 15 in this case. And remembering that I need to do a domain space lookup, not dash, and I need to change my gig interfaces to Ethernet interfaces. But that should do it. Let's copy that. Let's open up a console for R2. And let's paste in our modified base configuration. I don't see any issues. Everything looked clean when it went in. Let's see if I have connectivity. Can I ping R1 from R2? Let me look at my topology to remind myself of the IP address. Can I ping 198.51.100.1? Let's try. We had an ARP timeout on the first ping, that's expected. All subsequent pings, though, they're successful. So we have now very quickly taken this base configuration, which was not built on the free version of CML, and we did some slight modifications so it would work on the free version of CML. And you might have to do the same thing if you were adopting this for your own home lab with physical gear. And that's a look at how you can download the course labs and how you can take the base configuration in that lab document and apply it to your specific lab setup.